Welcome to the Cinema Cartography.
Elephant by Gus Van Sant deals with a circumstance of almost unimaginable proportions, but delivers it with such quietness and removes sentimentality that it will suggest to be an event sewn into the fabric of the everyday. At least in certain aspects, Van Sant suggests that it may in fact be the subconscious of everyday events which led up to such a catastrophe. One of the films of Gus Van Sant's Death trilogy, Elephant displays its intense violence by choosing not to display it. The film is a very dreamlike experience, one which has resulted in the major criticism of the film. The characters talk and react in very droll, often stilted manners.
I saw two guys come from the other side.
Holy cow.
They had big black bags and camel gear on.
Oh my God.
Where'd you go?
The film is rather short in length and does not show us much depth in what goes on around the fact, rather focusing on the mundanity of a normal day, which is unknowingly about to be destroyed. Yet in showing all of these things, Elephant also manages to display the simultaneous opposite. The film is the collected perspectives of many of the students within the school. We follow their monotonous routines, insofar that it's not what they're doing that's the focus, but the abject meaninglessness and tedium of their actions. Bear in mind that in a film less than 80 minutes, much of its construction is made up of incredibly long tracking shots of people going from one place to another. There's a calmness to it all, even knowing what's about to unfold. Van Sant chooses not to interfere in Elephant, rather that by using the extreme serenity of the mostly emptiness of life, he manages to strip the film of all its excess qualities, including its violence. The violence in Elephant takes us by surprise, feeling as though we may have escaped it. We certainly have the time, and though the violence is ultimately bare and unglamorous, it's also equally shown as another banal action. There's no excitement within Elephant, thus the violence becomes just as mechanical as the act of walking. Van Sant asks us to examine the perspectives of each of its characters, yet we're incapable of gaining any kind of legitimate closeness with them, and typically in films of this kind, we're often shown the threads that may have led up to such an event. But it's in those spaces that the answers will lie, and like everyone else, we may have been able to see them if we all weren't ignoring the elephant in the room. This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/cinemacartography. That's mubi.com/cinemacartography for a whole month of great cinema for free. In 1975, Chantal Akerman created her masterpiece, a film which married the mundanity of the everyday with an extremely minimised and formalistic piece of filmmaking. The result was Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai de Commerce, 1080, Bruxelles. It can be argued that Jeanne Dielman developed a kind of cinematic language where the meaninglessness of action gave birth to a new kind of extremity. The plot is simply the life of a woman over the course of 3 days. This is a kind of woman that everyone knows. If anything, in many ways, is a microcosm for the life of many women. The filmmaking tears down any notion of traditional storytelling technique and opts for a stagnant world that unravels at an unbearably slow pace. At 200 minutes in length, the emptiness of Jeanne's actions becomes the focal point, and throughout the entirety of the film, the camera is static, shot directly at Jeanne. The composition of the frame, made up of straight lines mimicking the organised and routine-orientated foundation of her life. We sit uninterrupted and watch as Jeanne peels potatoes, folds clothes, and does the everyday chores that many people do. However, this is an action that in most people's lives is ignored, yet when placed through the lens of the camera, we remove the context of the action and get to evaluate it for what it actually is. Sitting for 10 minutes at a time, watching someone perform an action that will inevitably be undone is the purpose of Jeanne's existence. The character of Jeanne lives a life of subservience. All her actions are for the sake of her son's comfort or for the satisfaction of other men. She becomes an object based on her interaction with the environment being one of functionality, as we realise that the full name of the film becomes just as important as the piece itself, for Jeanne Dielman is a woman without an identity. She's defined by the maintenance of the lifestyle she upholds, her entire life existing in her home.
Je devrais répondre à tante Fernand. Les pommes de terre doivent être cuites maintenant.
Jeanne Dielman is a film which can be explained in a few sentences. However, to watch it is a transformative experience as it takes the elements which make up most people's lives and reframes them in a completely new context. A woman's life that has become so ritualized that to live is the ritual. And it takes something so minute in that ritual to fall apart that in her world, those actions again become reframed, just as in ours. Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai de Commerce 1080 Bruxelles, demonstrates that vindication is capable of any person. Perhaps all we need to do is examine what we already have and ask why it need be that way. On exploring the prejudices that exist all around us, Werner Fassbinder's Ali, Fear Eats the Soul, examines how an unconventional love between two people can harbour the rage and anger from those that don't understand.
Nix verstehen. Ich sage Libelle. Gleiche für Butter. Aber nix Limonade. Du nix verstehen. Was das?
Was will er denn?
Libelle.
Na klar, das ist die neue Margarine.
Meinst du, das weiß er nicht?
Always willing to tell stories that examine all perspectives and the judgments that everyone has the capacity to make, Ali Fear Eats the Soul shows from the young to the old, from all different cultures, that people do not like that which they do not recognise. A young Arabian man and an older German widow fall in love with one another after finding an inexplicable connection. The two are the only two sincere characters within the film, never questioning why they feel the way they do, or the means of how they reached it. They live their life truthfully. However, in what Fassbinder often described as the fascism of the family life, others, for a multitude of reasons, despise what they represent.
Dein. Ja, Paula, wir sind seit 3 Monaten verheiratet.
Oh Gott.
Both Europeans and Arabians feel that they've become traitors of their race and treat them as such. As we see throughout the film, their love is questioned or imposed upon by many people. The result is that we view them either caught between multiple people, often surrounded or cornered by them.
Sag mal, habt ihr Gastarbeiter bei euch?
Hör bloß mit sowas auf. Bei Gastarbeitern, da sieht rot.
Warum denn?
Weil es Schweine sind.
Ach so.
Ja!
The threatening nature that they find themselves in is evident, as the camera displays the claustrophobic nature of a world that finds your very being immoral. Eventually, this disdain explodes, turning to an ostracization from civilized society. Our main characters are placed far away from others and outright ignored. Fassbinder is unafraid to use close-ups to convey intimacy, as well as though we are viewing these people's lives, casting judgment as so much of society is. However, eventually, we can see the unfurling of love as outward pressure begins to collapse in on the couple, as they seek to return to their native cultural surroundings for an easier way of living. But in betraying one's convictions, one must live a false life, never who you truly are. All we can do is hope that amidst a world of hate, the love of two people can make it through to the end. The notion of victimization and misery is one that attracts interest from many artists. However, from the audience perspective, it becomes a more unreasonable idea to call a film entertaining or to state that you enjoy it. In The Match Factory Girl by Kaurismaki, we see in essence the inadvertent torture of a young girl whose life has become a vessel for her own suffering. The world that Kaurismaki paints is one which evokes a sense of disgust. The paint chips away from jagged stone walls, the food appears as cold and miserable as the people eating it, and all the colours have become faded, leaving behind limp, unappealing hues, as if all vitality has been drained from the world itself. It appears that the denizens of this world have given up. The world could be burning outside, and no one would do anything about it.
Teltat paloivat tai jäivät telaketjujen alle. Vapauden Jumalatar kaadettiin. Torilla tajuttiin, että tämä on loppu.
Even the music of this world, which is supposed to be somewhat jovial, is met with emotionless demeanours. And at the centre of all this misery is our main character, the Match Factory Girl. She exists in a world where any joy has been depleted. Even the mere suggestion of such a thing is seen as alien.
Ajattelen, että voisimme tavata.
Tänään ei käy.
Her life is one of abject pity. Her demeanour suggests that she attempts to make life more enjoyable. She buys nice things. She attempts to enjoy herself in the wider world. But all, in some manner, seems to be snatched away from her. For she is alone in this mindset. As we see, she's made to prominently feature isolated in the fame, Kaurismaki seeking to exacerbate this, as if it was not enough to see her sat alone, we must see how truly alone she is. Can't you see I'm on my bended knees? And as if to punish her even more, when she isn't alone, we can assure that with enough time, she will be. The film plays with many juxtapositions, such as using more upbeat music during the film's most dismal moments, and in fact we soon realise that the film's opening of close-ups of machinery within the match factory is possibly the scene which garners the most excitement throughout the film. Even here, our character's life is incapable of competing with the absolute dullness of manufactured, industrialised work. Kaurismaki approached the match factory girl with a matter-of-fact sternness. However, we do see that there is a rooting for our main character. Her mere attempts at bettering a dreadful world makes her redeemable, and perhaps she may redeem herself. That maybe the best way to fix a destroyed world is to destroy whatever it was they chose to build in its place. When dealing with the idea of a stark and direct style of filmmaking, we often refer to a form of cinema that's been stripped down to its barest elements. However, in Haneke's 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, we see a self-imposed limitation on what the director has decided he can and cannot show. The challenging structure of 71 Fragments is made slightly more comprehensible by the film's title, indicating the form of communication the film has with the viewer, ironically being a film that is in itself about difficulty or lack of communication thereof between people.
Wie bitte?
Wie bitte was?
Entschuldige, ich habe nicht verstanden, was du zuletzt gesagt hast.
Du brauchst dich nicht entschuldigen. Ich habe gesagt, dank der Nachfrage gut.
The idea present in 71 Fragments demonstrate Haneke's ability to juxtapose showing things exactly as they are, and simultaneously leaving gaps of knowledge. The film, as suggested, consists of 71 fragments displaying the lives of varying people who will in some way interact. Haneke suggests that their lives are the microcosm, and that the final display of violence is in one way a chance act, and in another, a means of externalizing and representing the grandiosity of their interconnected lives. Within daily interactions, what we get to see of people is mere fragments. We only get to see very little. 71 Fragments extrapolates this and continues to show more uninterrupted fragments, with the ultimate realization that perhaps we understand with more information even less.
Was?
As a form, Haneke approaches his work with a cold precision. Each fragment is glacial in what it attempts to show, often incredibly recognizable, all the while completely incomprehensible. The slow and often rigid nature which people allow to constrict themselves in their lives by becoming less autonomous and more of an object within their milieu. Characters interact through gamifications of life. They see the world through screens. They struggle to talk face to face. Haneke displays through his stark world the troubles of communication within interpersonal relationships, and even within the realm of art, the fallacy that by showing the audience something, you're giving them an answer that things are a certain way. For what cinema shows us, it conceals just as much. The real is fragmentary. It's also highly contradictory. Haneke's formal approach allows an exploration of unique film grammar to question how we truly think about cinema, as well as a stark reminder that perhaps in search for a cinema of greater answer, we shall only be posed with even more questions.
Und wie viel Zeit willst du jetzt zum Zahnbauen?
Entschuldigung.
A pioneer of the Iranian New Wave movement, director Sohrab Shahid Salis brought a new look at the Iranian lifestyle in his minimalist masterpiece, Still Life. A cinematic piece of monotony and routine, Still Life crafts the narrative of an aging couple living at a train station. The husband operates the tracks while she weaves carpets, and while they're not doing that, they simply live. Salis treats his characters with a vivid sense of realism. Nothing that they do is either looked down upon, nor is it romanticised. We spend time with the couple. As time passes slowly, we become entrenched in their routines, as if we were there. Yet the film hints at a play in chronology, as if we reach a point of inertia that we can't discern one day from another.
یعنی چی؟ یعنی بازنشسته شدی. یعنی چی؟ یعنی برو تا آخر عمر بگرد دیگه.
The numbing pacing of the couple's life invites contemplation on our part. The camera is static, but primarily because it has no point to move. It can even be argued that it has no point of being there at all. And although we feel an almost helplessness in their circumstances, we also can't help but feel in the simplicity that is as raw and bare for all to see. There's a serenity that passes over us. Salis, in merely showing the act of living, is able to imbue such strong and diverse emotion within the film, many of which coexist with one another. The poetry of the film emerges from the strong sensibilities envisioned by the filmmaker. As the routine of every day becomes cyclical, so do the lives of people become a lyrical journey of deep introspection. What does it mean to live, and is it different to being alive?
نه.
Salis displays the rhythmic nature of tedium through cinema, reminding us that within nothing there lies so much. Valeska Grisebach's 2017 film Western is a film I would describe as bleak, not necessarily for its content, but with the starkness it's willing to show it. It reminds us that behind the romanticism of art lies stories that are what they are. Often we don't see the totality of what goes on, for most of it bubbles beneath the surface, felt yet rarely witnessed.
Имам проблем с фамилията за парички, ако може да си ми върнеш паричките. Приятел.
As is the story of Western, a tale of German construction workers as they set to complete contracted work in Bulgaria. Amidst the narrative, we witness the construction workers start to harass women and fan the flames of the locals by hoisting the German flag on their soil. Various prejudices of the other slowly begin to be felt, yet rarely is anything acted directly upon.
Хайде, тръгваме. Проблем? Няма. Тръгваме.
The film deals with the concept of masculinity, playing on the ideas of the American Western genre, And though we deal with the typically more pragmatic and direct approach of boisterous men, we find that far more tension and things unsaid are manifested, creating an atmosphere that sheaths the small Bulgarian town they find themselves in.
И преди времето са минавали немци.
Тия са минавали, ама...
Те са културни хора, възпитани.
То явно не от тия, които са възпитаните.
Amongst many things, Western is a story of otherness. The main protagonist attempts to find a camaraderie within the people of the village, despite cultural and language barriers. The ubiquitous use of misunderstandings, an overtly simplified conversation being miscomprehended, ties into the filmic grammar. With an elliptical editing, prioritizing the silent, more atmospheric moments rather than moments to progress the narrative, we again struggle to find a material reason as to why such tensions seem to be ever present here. Yet perhaps, as the film struggles to explain those things, and rather invites time for introspective moments of the character, we are to do the same, and answer this question on a more transcendental plane. For in Western, nothing is as blunt as it would have you believe.
Mein Leben ist manchmal kompliziert.
The iconography of the Western genre is transgressed, and the seemingly amiable actions of the people are not perhaps as honest as they may seem. The protagonist Meinhard is an outsider. Throughout the film, Grisebach shoots in long focal lengths, as if we're not present to ingratiate ourselves into the world, merely to witness. There's an ever-present distance, and much like Meinhard, we're never completely in with them. Perhaps pessimistic in tone, but perhaps otherness is an element that must be overcome by humanity, otherwise our actions are never to be taken on face value. Western demonstrates that just because a person is different to what was expected, that they are nice and easy to get along with, maybe it is precisely that demeanour in which dishonesty is formed. Perhaps we need people to be more radical in their actions if we're to discover their real truth. For in the meantime, you can act in a way to please everyone without fully committing yourself to the world. You're an outsider, for you choose to be. Lynne Ramsay's debut feature film Ratcatcher in many ways fits into the traditional definition of bleak. However, there's also a sense of redemption and hope within its pause. From the opening shot of the main character James twirling inside a translucent curtain, we're delivered this idea of birth and renewal. This being juxtaposed to the film's setting of 1970s Glasgow on a council estate where refuse, filth and rats line the streets.
This place, man.
Like many films typified by the British kitchen sink drama, there are certain grim characteristics that Ratcatcher also inhibits, although it goes much beyond that. The first thing we can see about Ratcatcher is the sense of grit that the world holds. Boys play in mucky water, and the dirt sticks to them. Little things are picked out of children's hair, and the major characteristic of everyone's lives is the oppressive mire that's contaminated every facet of their being.
Stephen.
Yet where Ratcatcher tends to stand out from the rest is Lynne Ramsay's somewhat poetic and meditative gaze. Unafraid to go beyond the realms of reality to convey an idea, and also willing to share in the simple moments of a scene, inviting us to engage and think. Ratcatcher is a film that plays on the instinctual. Landscapes tie into the narrative and become lands that encapsulate the internal psychology of the characters. Ramsay, again unafraid to hold the two standards of gritty realism displayed in her cinema verite style, while being able to perfectly compose everything in front of us, like voyeurs, asked to assess what we see. Ratcatcher is perhaps best described as a film about society at large through the eyes of a child, always out of control of the things so much larger than they are. Often the best thing to do is escape, both figuratively and literally. And in Ratcatcher, we find that sometimes escape may not be a choice we have at all. Perhaps we trudge through the muck forever, as the rubbish keeps piling up, like the waste in our own mind. We must address the things for what they are, or risk finding ourselves in a fantasy world. Perhaps this world may be our paradise, or perhaps it's one whose consequences we can't comprehend. We'd like to thank Mubi for sponsoring this video. Mubi is a curated streaming service, an ever-changing collection of hand-picked films from new directors to award winners from everywhere on earth. Beautiful, interesting, incredible movies, and a new one every single day, always chosen by Mubi curators. You can stream or download all of Mubi's movies anytime, on any screen, any device, anywhere, and you'll never see a single ad on Mubi. Right now on Mubi, you can check out Ratcatcher by Lynne Ramsay, as well as many other films that we mentioned throughout our essays. You can try Mubi for free for 30 days at mubi.com/cinemacartography. That's mubi.com/cinemacartography for a whole month of great cinema for free.